this is my reaction, initial thoughts to The Well. Now, the previous 2 weeks, I've not been able to get my thoughts out immediately from watching the episodes. Obviously, we've got the 8 AM drop this year. I've explained about that in previous videos, but I was not working today, and so I've been able to watch it. As I've got up and get my thoughts out immediately. So this is, unlike the previous 2 videos, I have not seen the general reaction to this at all. I don't know what people think of it. I'm only basing this off of my thoughts. I've not seen the Unleashed or anything like that. But I thought The Well, I expect the reaction to be very positive, because I think this was another really strong episode. I'm very, very happy. I think that when there was rumours that this was going to be a sequel to Midnight, I was a bit unsure, because that is such a strong episode, and I think Midnight is the scariest episode of Doctor Who ever. As an adult, the idea of human paranoia and people turning against each other in a small enclosed space, that's scarier than any monster. And it's such a wonderfully written episode, such a beautifully constructed piece. The Doctor is so vulnerable in that story, and we know nothing about the monster. Of course, we don't know what it's called. We never see it, and so yeah, I was cautious going into this, expecting it to be a sequel to Midnight, and of course it was. As soon as they started talking about galvanic radiation, I recalled that was a thing from Midnight, and was like, oh yeah, that's what we're doing here. But I think this was, I don't think I could have asked for a better sequel story to Midnight. Is it as good as that story? I don't think so. But I think in terms of how it expands on that story, it's fantastic. I'm trying to just kind of collate my thoughts into something coherent. I want to shout out, I believe her name is Rose Ayling-Ellis, who played Alice in this story. Of course, she's a deaf actor, and I thought she was fantastic in this. Really wonderfully emotional and vulnerable in the way that, the creature makes you vulnerable. I also thought that it was a great way of, and not that you need justification for putting disability representation in an episode. There doesn't need to be a reason why this character is deaf, but it's always nice when that is implemented as part of the story. And I think it was something I kind of called early on, that like the reason she survived is because she can't hear it. Obviously we know from the original story that the creature works through sound, it copies, and I'm glad that we didn't do that again. I think the fact that it's been so long since that initial story, the Doctor talks about how it was learning, so it's not doing the same tricks, and I think that's good. I think if it was just doing the repeating again, it would be a little bit, I'm not sure what else you could do with that repeating concept than what you did in that original story. I thought that kind of throwing people around was a little bit goofy, but it was still effective. Just the building tension of this story, that first 20 minutes was just so tense. I really felt kind of on the edge of my seat. You're just waiting for this thing. You know that something is happening, but you don't know exactly what. And yeah, I thought that it was a really effective evolution of the creature, in the same way that all the best Doctor Who monsters are. You look like the Weeping Angels, who are a gimmick monster, and every time they come back, they kind of add new things to them, to the point where maybe the Weeping Angels have a bit too many kind of rules and gimmicks and stuff. There is a danger of doing that with a creature like the Midnight Entity, but I thought that this was good. I don't feel like we should ever. This is the thing. I don't feel like we ever need to see it again. Of course, there is the suggestion at the end that maybe it didn't die, which I'm not sure I like that. I think that maybe if we'd just held on that other character looking at, I forget the character's name, who is there at the end, who survives. I think if you just kind of held on her, kind of looking, but didn't really draw attention to it, because I think the kind of self-sacrifice to kill the creature was a wonderful moment, and of course the creature wouldn't die. It would just be down there, at the bottom of the well. But I also kind of like the idea that this creature just refuses to die. It refuses to let go. But yeah, that was the only thing where I kind of wish. My interpretation is that it did die and that it did get thrown down that well. I think that's more satisfying. I don't think we need another story with this creature, but hey, we've had two really good ones now, so why not? I think if you're going to do another story with this creature, and it could be a case where every, 17 years or however many years it's been since Midnight, every 20 years you do a story with this creature, and you add something else and it evolves, maybe that could work. But yeah, I thought that this was really, I think the kind of nervousness and the anxiety I had about doing a sequel to Midnight, I think this episode kind of proved, and I had a good feeling, to be fair. I was cautiously optimistic, because I thought the trailers looked good and I thought it looked creepy, and it absolutely lived up to that. I didn't much care for the soldier character. I forget the character's name and the actor's name. It was kind of the second in command who kind of was putting heads with the Doctor. I didn't much care for him. Obviously, you have that kind of, you do want the kind of the escalation of the conflict, and that's what the creature does. It was a little bit generic in the sense of, I don't trust the Doctor, and which I'm going to take over command and all this. But so I didn't really care for that aspect. But what I did kind of like or appreciate in terms of the story was that then when the leader, I don't remember any of the characters' names in this. I've literally just watched it. Sharma or something like that. But when the leader, I thought she was a good character. When she got Alice to turn to put him behind the creature so that he would die, and the Doctor's like, yeah, that's what it makes you do. It makes you turn on each other. I thought that was a great way of showing how the creature manipulates your fear and your anxiety, and it makes you turn on each other. Yeah, I thought that was, again, it's stuff it's what we know that this entity does. I also really appreciated, as I suspect most people will appreciate, is that we did not see the creature. You see a kind of a vaguest shadow, and that was the most you ever should see of that thing. And the Doctor kind of gets a little look at it. But I like the idea that it doesn't have any form. It doesn't really have any, it can't be seen. It can only be heard. Um, um, but yeah, I think that was a smart move, and I think even, you know, I think I don't agree with all of Russell's sensibilities currently with this version of the show. I think I've probably mentioned that once or twice here, or maybe I haven't. I tried to be as kind of respectful and diplomatic as possible in those sorts of things, but I don't agree with all of his decisions. I think that the idea of this being a season 1, season 2, kind of a fresh start, and then the finale of last series being so heavily reliant on previous Who history, I think is a baffling creative choice personally. And I would not have been entirely surprised if he'd have gone, oh, we're doing a sequel, let's show the creature, let's make it the biggest, most horrible design. I could see a world where that happens, but I think I was going to say, to give him some credit, he doesn't need credit from me, of course. He's one of the most successful writers in the country, for good reason. I think even he realises, and even he understands that, like, you don't want to see the creature. That's not the point. So yeah, I'm just really happy. I'm really, really happy with this. I don't know if I liked it more than looks. I think I did. I think it was scary. It was a proper. I don't remember the last time a Doctor Who episode has been that scary. It was just genuinely unnerving and kind of nail biting. And that, as I say, that first 20 minutes, all the stuff with Belinda and the soldiers in that big room with Alice, is just fun. It was wonderful, building tension. It was just fantastically played. Yeah, I am very, very. I'm just happy. I'm just pleased. I think we seem to be on for a real winner of the series. And yeah, we've got some guest writers, of course, for the next couple of weeks. I'm not sure about next week, Lucky Day. It looks like it could be interesting. It seems to be a kind of largely Ruby-focused story. It's nice to see in the next time trailer the Doctor in his kind of standard outfit with the kind of Church on Ruby Road, last scene of Empire of Death outfit with the orange top and the leather jacket and everything. That seems to be his signature look, his kind of iconic look. It's nice to see him in that again. There's a little bit of a consistency there with his outfit choices. That was something I wasn't a big fan of, the pre-titles. I thought that the Doctor and Belinda's little bit in the TARDIS was kind of retreading stuff from last week. She talks about her dad, and it's like, okay, yeah, we know you love your parents, and not that that's, yeah, she should, but it was a little bit, of course, you get the Doctor's promise there, which is important. Like, I understand why that scene exists, because the Doctor makes his promise, which comes back at the end. You're also saying up the idea that, like, yeah, there's always a human race and Earth exists to this point, and then these people don't know Earth at all. I don't really understand why the Doctor and Belinda went into the TARDIS wardrobe and got the exact same kind of spacesuits as the rest of the group, and then were immediately thrown into the adventure. But okay. I think ultimately you just want them on the planet. It's kind of a just get them there. It doesn't. You don't think to, and like, you don't come away from the episode thinking, oh, that was a bit of a weak cold open. I think because the cold open for Lux was so strong, that this was a little bit kind of. it just seemed a bit of a strange coincidence to immediately get into those outfits and then immediately join the platoon and like just not get anything. And they were like, yeah, just jump, you're down. And then when they got on the surface of the planet, then they were questioned. But of course you can't have the TARDIS on the planet because then they just leave and you need them to do the story. So it's a little bit of a clunky way of getting them down there, but I can forgive it ultimately for the strength of the story that then followed. I don't think I have kind of I don't think I have too much to really say other than that. It was just a nice, simple story, effective story, and I loved it. You know, again, I think that there's this thing, and I think I talked about it last week, if I recall. This idea that with Doctor Who nowadays, you can't just have a simple story. You've got to add an extra element. You've got to give it something else. It can't just be Doctor lands in a place and fights a global god monster. But I disagree with that. I think if it's written well, you can. And I think this story is testament of that. Of course, it's playing off a previous story, but I think it's simple. It's not trying to be anything more than what it is. Of course, it's got it talks about how it's saying up the idea that the Earth doesn't exist anymore, and of course you've got Mrs. Flood there as well, and she's clearly wondering about his Vindicator. But yeah, it was just a self-contained. This is the story. This is the threat. These are the characters that you have to care about, and it's fantastic. It's wonderful. I mean, it's really great to be enjoying a series so thoroughly. I thought the Robot Revolution was a bit of fun, and the last two stories have been really, really strong. I've got a good feeling about this series. It could all come undone in the finale when you think the last series, it was probably a little bit similar, where the run of episodes was quite strong, and then the finale kind of, fumbled it all, and that could happen again here. But I think the progression of this series at this point is stronger than last series. I think Space Babies is fine, but really kind of underwhelming. I think it's okay, but it's not a fantastic story. It's a bit of a weird first story. There's stuff with that, like you can tell that they had to cut around. They were going to play the Push the Button song, and then that was on the jukebox in the TARDIS. That got cut, but then there's references to Push the Button throughout the episode that don't really make sense. I am not a big fan of the Devil's Court at all. Again, I spoke about this last week, that I think the fundamental premise of that story is just it doesn't really work. And you've also got stuff in that, like they've been travelling for 6 months, where it feels like 6 months. I know Russell talked about what that is, and it's absolutely nonsense reasoning. And then in Boom, it's Ruby's first trip in the TARDIS. First trip to a different planet. And they've just turned into the 12th Doctor and Clara. I think if you look at where we were at this point last series, and where we are now in this series, it's a much stronger run of episodes, and the connective tissue, and not even just the fact that these stories kind of lead directly one to another. I get the sense that we might have a little bit of we might not pick immediately back up with Lucky Day, but we'll see. I'll be interested to see because it seems like the Doctor and Belinda are going to be at a different time to where Ruby is. Also, there's scenes with the Doctor and Ruby, but surely season, so we'll see. But yeah, I think that this series is so far is shaping up really nicely. We've had three strong episodes. There's nothing here that is a dud, and the last two especially have been really strong. I know people have been talking about Lux being one of the all-timers already a little bit. That I would not be surprised if there is similar sentiment for this episode as well. Yeah, it's fantastic. I also want to credit as well, I know I talked about Russell, Sharma Warful Angel, who co-wrote this. I don't know exactly how much of this is her and how much is Russell. If this was her idea to do a sequel to Midnight, or if it was Russell's idea, I don't know. I suspect more that might kind of come out. That might be a little bit in the Unleashed and stuff, but yeah, I think that the writing on this episode was really strong. As I say, you know, the building of the tension. I really liked the character of Alice. I liked the leader character. I didn't so much like the kind of the bloke, as I mentioned, but I understood his function within the story, and I love the way that it developed on the things we know about this entity from the original story, and it really gave it a personality of its. You know, the Doctor is so disgusted. He calls it vile. He says he's never been more scared in his life, and you believe him. You know, like sometimes the Doctor's like, "Oh, I'm so scared. I've never been more scared." And you can't. You're like, really though? Is that? I'm not sure. You know, sometimes the Doctor will say things you don't really believe. At the end of the giggle, when he says, "I've never been so happy in my life," I don't really believe him. But I've seen Midnight. I've seen how scared he is in that story. I believe that he has never been more scared in the moment than that moment, because he's so helpless. And you know, and he talks about how this creature it plays games, it has fun, it's cruel. He connects with Alice on the sense of like, I know how scared and how vulnerable you feel. I know, I have felt that. Yeah, this was a real winner, and I did not expect to be so positive about the Midnight sequel episode. I kind of thought, as long as it doesn't cheapen Midnight, we'll be fine. It might be like a so-so episode, but as long as it doesn't actively lessen that episode, and it hasn't. I don't know if it's strengthened it necessarily, but this is really strong, and it makes me think that maybe it was Sharma Warful Angel was like, I want to do a sequel to Midnight, and then Russell will go right, because obviously he wrote that original story, but it seems like you wouldn't do it just for the sake of doing it. This was a great story. I loved it. So yeah, I think I'm going to just keep talking myself in circles if I carry on. So I'm going to leave it there. Those are my thoughts on The Well. I think as I've spoken about this, I've enjoyed it more and more through the course of just doing this. What did you think of The Well? Did you enjoy it? Were you satisfied by it as a sequel to Midnight? And yeah, thank you very much for watching. Please like this video if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't. And I will see you all next week.